Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Uncast. As always, I'm your host, Jonathan Panazzo, and for today's episode, I'm joined by a couple of gents from our community. You may know them from our forums, Reddit, or YouTube. They have produced a ton of content around Unraid OS. Whether you want to learn how to set up Home Assistant, optimize your Plex configuration, utilize Cloudflare, or host your own alternative to Google Photos with PhotoPrism, these guys have you covered. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Sycotix, DiskDuck, and Hawks from the Ibracorp community. Welcome, guys. Really glad to have you guys here today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I want to start with Sycotix. I was originally talking to you online about setting this whole thing up. I think maybe a good place to start is to kind of talk a little bit about what Ibracorp is, who you guys are, and what you guys do. So you want to take it away?
Yeah, no worries, man. Thanks very much for having us on. We've been looking forward to it all week, actually. So we're finally glad to get on here with you. So
Yeah,
Ibracorp started off as an idea, basically like any idea, really. I wanted to make some content for people to learn more about Unraid, learn more about system administration at home and self-hosting. And while there was a lot of content out there, I thought it was time to bring a different sort of spin on things, maybe bring my own teaching attitude to it as well, and see whether people enjoyed it. And yeah, since then it's grown quite a bit. We're nearly at 5,500 subscribers, so it's way more than I expected when I first started. And then since then we've started taking on team members and growing it even further and building a community. That was really the main thing. The content was one part of it, but we really wanted to build a community. So I feel very, very proud that we've done that now. And it continues to grow because I found in other communities, people weren't welcome or they were sort of talked down to, where I wanted a space that everyone felt welcome to come and share their ideas and share their knowledge. So that's where we're at the moment. We're still making great content and we've still got a community that's growing. And we hope to keep that up basically at this point and look into more things that we can do for the community, especially those in the Unraid one as well.
That's awesome. And how long have you guys been doing this now?
Literally started on January 1st, 2021. So about 9 months.
Wow. I thought you guys were around a little bit longer than that. That's crazy. You guys have grown that fast in just this year alone. That's awesome. That's really awesome. Yeah. And how did you personally get into Unraid?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I wanted to look for a new operating system to set up a server on. I came from, a long chain of servers and started off on a laptop, probably like everyone else. And I started doing some Googling to figure out what kind of OS I might want. I stumbled across Unraid's website, which just blew me away at first because I thought, this looks nice and clean. What is it? I looked into it a bit more and tried to understand how it worked, and I thought, I'll give it a try. We had a 30-day trial and just needed a USB stick. Next thing I know, I was knee-deep in Docker and containers and fixing and breaking and restarting and watching, YouTube videos to try and learn more. And I haven't turned back since, so it's been a good journey.
Yeah, it sounds like a familiar story. How about Duck? How about you? How did you get started?
Well, with Unraid, I stumbled across it because I was looking for a solution to get away from Hyper-V and from the Microsoft Server corner. I tried Drive Bender, stable bit drive pool, which I'm sure is something that rings bells with other people. And once I found Unraid, I came across it because it supported Docker, it supported virtual machines, and it supported local storage. And it was very forgiving with the drive size and putting a drive in, taking it out again, and all that. So after I first had some experience with it, I grew it very quickly to now 3 servers that I'm running on Unraid. And as you know, I'm already virtualizing Unraid on Unraid to get even some more focus on products that I can run on Unraid.
Nice. Yeah, we use a lot of virtual instances of Unraid here too for development. It's just very convenient to be able to do test builds on a VM as opposed to having to constantly build it on a real system. So yeah, I totally get that. Totally get that. Hawks, how about you? How did you get started?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was two and a bit years ago. I first started with FreeNAS, and started with a ZFS array, but kind of quickly came to the conclusion that, you know, if you don't buy all your hardware straight away, you're quite limited on what you can do, you know, with expansion and whatnot. Then kind of moved into the cloud and started running Docker on Ubuntu actually. And that's where I've learned most things Docker and self-hosting. But, you know, that's all via command line, which is all, you know, good. And it's been a good learning experience, but I wanted to bring something home and have a bit of a nice UI to be able to run it all from. So that's kind of where I found Unraid. And again, it's the same with the flexibility. I knew about ZFS, and I know the pros and cons of ZFS, but I wanted something that was flexible. You know, basically just use all the hardware that I have around the house and just chuck it all together. And then when I get a bit more money, just start investing and upgrading it bit by bit, which has suited me perfectly, really.
Yeah, the UI bit there, that's very important. The UI is a big seller.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, when people talk about like what is Unraid, right, and what is our proprietary technology or what is our unique value, I really think it comes down to two things more than anything else. If we really were to boil everything down to brass tacks, I think it's our user interface, and I think it's how we manage the array. Those are really the unique and most powerful benefits of the OS, because you know, you can go out there and you can get Arch, you can get Ubuntu, you can get Fedora, you can get whatever platform you want for Linux, and you can add a variety of different management panels that are made by a variety of different people, and you can download all the different packages for virtualization, for Docker, for whatever you're going to use, and basically what we call roll your own OS, right? You know, you can build your own platform and manage it yourself. But each one of those individual management interfaces is built and controlled by someone different. And none of those packages that are required to do what Unraid does are loaded by default. You have to know how to go get all of that stuff. And then when you go to update and manage that thing over time, eventually sometimes things break, you know, especially when you're updating kernels or you're updating packages or the distro's updating or changing things. Packages might not be compiled for the distro yet. There's just a lot of things that can go wrong. And when something goes wrong on an uncommon platform like Ubuntu, like Fedora, like all those platforms, trying to get support is a real pain, you know, because everybody's got their own little version of that world. And when you add the uniqueness of hardware to the mix, it becomes an even bigger challenge. So, you know, us providing that common platform, common interface, common kernel release, common OS platform, I think that's what boils out a lot of the issues that are unique per user. So,
well said, John. Well said. It's especially when you're looking up stuff. I've made a joke before, but I don't know how many of us have probably spent time on Stack Overflow looking for an answer because it's a one unique problem that you seem to be the only one that has it. Whereas with Unraid, you know, there's a vibrant community. You've got the forums, you've got the website, you've got YouTube, you've got all sorts of different platforms, and Discord, of course, and people coming together and sharing ideas. So there's always an answer or somewhere to at least find an answer. And that's what I've found in my experience so far.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's the key part is the community behind it. And, you know, you can create an awesome product, but if you don't have the community behind it, you know, not many people are going to use it. But the fact that you guys have been able to create this community where they're all, you know, developing their own stuff and bringing it in as a plugin or, you know, getting involved with you guys and, you know, everyone feels part of it. You know, it's your guys' product, but actually they feel part of, you know, building it up to be what it is today.
Totally. And I mean, that's even kind of goes back to the story of how Unraid got created. You know, I mean, Tom, our CEO, was, you know, he wasn't retired, but he was done working for a while. And his son actually came to him and started having discussions about, you know, hey, man, like we could really benefit by having a server that worked this way, where you could add one disk at a time. He's like, you know, all these other platforms out there, because he's a media guy. He does custom home media setups for like really wealthy people that have these crazy elaborate houses that need these, you know, insane TV and back-end server setups. You know, like that's what he would do. And he's like, you know, this
sounds like a dream job.
Yeah, I mean, he gets flown around the world to do this. So I mean, yeah, he's definitely got a nice career. But he went to his dad and said, hey, you know, there's an opportunity out here to do this. And Tom kind of looked at this originally as beer money. You know, this was just a side project that he wanted to do that was fun, that he thought there was other people out there that would want. And the initial advertising was going on. I don't know if you guys have ever been to AVS Forum, but that's where he went to originally post and say, hey, I got this little project out there. this is what it does. I'm not sure if anybody's interested, but if so, come check us out. He had to ask permission to post because they have a no advertising policy, but they allowed it because they were like, oh, well, this is somebody who's building something that's kind of for our community. It was for people that were really into like home media server setups. And, you know, just the thing kind of just grew from there. And so I think Unraid was always a community project. It was always, you know, in the IT, or I should say in the software development industry, especially when it comes to building infrastructure, right? That's what we built originally, was a NAS. It was infrastructure. I think that it's easy as a business to pivot to business customers, right? And say that's who my target's going to be. I'm going to go sell to business customers. They have deep pockets. They don't care about cost as much as they care about cost reduction, which is what you're selling them on as a solution to make things easier or cost less money for them. It's easy to do that. And that's how a lot of our competitors are. And when people talk about like FreeNAS, for example, like FreeNAS is free because it's an entry point for IT professionals to look at it so that they can go into the office and convince their bosses there to buy TrueNAS. That's the whole reason that FreeNAS is free. It's not out there for home media guys that want to build a home media server. I mean, that you can do that. You can clearly do that with it, but that's not why they built that. That's not why they released it for free. They released it for free the same reason that Microsoft barely charges anything for educational licenses on Office, because they want people to start using it and then become hooked on it, and then that's what they're going to buy when they get into the real world. So, you know, that was definitely an option for Unraid. Even when I came on board, we could have pivoted, we could have started doing that, but the whole purpose of this project from the early days has been to put the power of enterprise-grade virtualization and server technology at the hands of everyday consumers that just want a media server, and allowing them to take full advantage of the capabilities of their hardware and what Linux has to offer without making them have to become an IT administrator. That was kind of the idea. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, mate. I was just going to say that's exactly why you guys have been as successful as you have been, because that's the right attitude to have, I think, in my opinion. And it's something that we've carried across in our communities is, you know, everyone, we want to support this open source future. We also want to support developers who want to provide their time to build stuff for these platforms. So, yeah, this whole community together should be working together, and it has been, and so it's fantastic to see, you know. Whereas with these proprietary things, you don't know what they're doing. They just do whatever they want and they expect you to pay for it.
Right.
So
I love that. I love that our community is so rich and vibrant that it has spawned sub communities like your Syc. I mean, this is like seeing what you guys have done and how fast it's grown and how many additional people have come to you. I think it's awesome. I think it's really great, and we want to see that continue. You know, you guys aren't the only ones out there. There's others out there that have done the same thing, like Linux Server IO, and growing their community size in a very similar fashion. So I love seeing sub communities come out of ours, because, you know, ours is just huge. We have this giant community that has a very wide berth to it as far as what people are using the software for. And then you can get more and more narrowed down and nuanced as you get into the sub communities and you focus on different things. Speaking of that, so maybe you guys want to talk for a minute about some of the more recent projects you guys have done. Like what has been keeping you most interested lately?
Yeah, you guys can jump in first on
that. I think it's basically since kind of joining this community and kind of helping out with basically supporting people for their own learning and stuff. As we've grown, we've tried to come up with, you know, new ideas for new tools. We started with tools that we knew well, put a guide together, make a video on it. But what's been quite interesting is actually going out now and starting to do a bit of research and finding new tools. Sometimes it's suggestions from the community. Sometimes you just go out and, you know, look elsewhere and find a cool tool that you think others will be interested in. And then you basically bring it back, write a guide on it, and then we try to get it out to the community. And I think there's been quite a good response with, you know, some of them, one of the videos being Tailscale, for example. I've always tried to find a VPN solution that's really easy, you know, click to add a device. And I've not been able to find it. The nearest I found was Zero Tier, which is great, but I've just found it quite unreliable. Whereas I'll search in the internet, I found Tailscale, and it's exactly what I wanted. It's one-click authorization, adds the device to your own virtual network, and basically you can then connect to any device at any time.
Absolutely.
But one of the benefits is that you don't have to tunnel all your traffic through to connect to those devices. And because it's based on WireGuard, you can connect only when you need to connect. so they're readily available as soon as you need to connect to them, but you're not connected all the time, so it doesn't drain your battery on your devices.
Yeah.
So that's been quite a good video, I think,
The
recently.
other thing is, I think I've found that with the apps, there are some apps that we cover or programs that we cover as well that aren't even on the App Store yet. So we try to bring those to the Unraid community and give a lot of exposure for the developers. So as part of our mission when we do a video, it's not just covering a topic, but trying to bring exposure to the developers so that if it is something that's really early, that they have more people using it to give them feedback to develop it a bit further, and trying to do our part there as well. So recent projects like that would probably, like Pterodactyl, for example, Hawks did a lot of work on that one, and we were able to get a video together. A lot of people wanted a video, want it for a while using Docker. So we did that, and I'm sure that brings just more people back to the developer to help them improve even more as well. What do you think about that, guys?
Yeah, and I think what's different about our community is the fact that we actually get the developers involved. We have the community, we have everyone there, but we also have the developers in there, which,
Yeah, that's right.
they each have their own Discord, but they're the only developers in there. Whereas I think we've managed to create a community space where actually they're all together and they all get involved and they all speak to the users. And if users have issues, then they do speak up and help them with that, which is quite key, I think, in this community.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that especially when it comes to, like, you were talking about Tailscale earlier, right? And I think that what's great about solutions like that is that they build on core technology, right? So you've got WireGuard, which I don't think anyone can disagree. WireGuard's an absolutely amazing VPN platform.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking at, as a user who's never had to set stuff like that up before, when you're looking at it, it does seem a little daunting because you got all these different keys that you have to figure out and all these different methods of the connection. So managing all that can be kind of a headache. So when you see something like Tailscale come out and offer a way to manage that that's a little simpler, I love that. I think that's great because it's taking really complex technology that at its core is rather complex or difficult to understand for layman users, and you're making it easy to grab and easy to get into.
Yeah.
So I want to shift gears for a minute about system builds. I want to hear what you guys are running. I'm curious to see who's got the wackiest setup here. Syke, let's start with you.
Oh, mate, I think mine is probably going to be the least of the lot
The
here.
least exciting.
Yeah. I just recently built my newest one just before my kids were born a few months ago. So I'm running an i9 10th generation, and got 64 gig of RAM, got the iGPU, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is, I'm just running standard containers and folders, which everybody sees in my videos anyway, as well. So nothing too crazy in there in terms of technology, but it is, a very nice processor, and I'm a big fan of Intel GPU, so I haven't really ever needed a dedicated graphics card. So I've been quite happy with having an Intel GPU running it. And then on that, I've got, a whole bunch of VMs, ones for AdGuard, and we've got our authentication databases and things like that. It's built up quite a bit. And honestly, I think I've done a video, and looking at my Docker page right now, I think I've done a video on everything that's in here. So I think most people probably have a similar setup by now.
Nice. How about you, Duck? What do you got going?
Well, I managed to reutilize some hardware I have had for a couple of years, and also a strong believer in second-hand hardware from the big distribution centers. So like a dual Xeon E5620 is my backup server, which has been running for many years now. And the beauty is it has a couple of hot plugs drive bays, which makes it very easy, especially with Unraid, to put in a spare 5 terabyte drive, which I don't use in another system anymore. I recently updated another system, which is my main storage system, to I believe 5 years old now, E52698 with 16 cores for a very reasonable amount of money. And that runs very, very nicely and takes care of all the VMs storage needs I have and the Docker containers that are running. And I have a smaller system which is actually a fun system because it's, I believe, the first ever Intel processor, the 3770, that ever did virtualization on a hardware level, and still Unraid runs nicely and easily on it. So that's what I'm
Nice.
playing with.
Nice. What about you, Hawks?
Yeah, so when I first started, I just took whatever was in my house. I think my friend asked me to build him a gaming PC before for £200, which is absolutely nothing. So I went onto eBay to try and find secondhand hardware, for the cheapest I could to try and get the kind of stats that he wanted. So
You can't even buy a Switch for $200. Like, what are you going to
yeah,
build as a gaming PC? Come on now.
yeah. So he eventually, I think he got a bonus at work, and so he upgraded all his hardware. And so I basically messaged him and just said, that board that I did for you, a year or so ago, could I have it? And he was like, yeah, fine. So basically, it's a tiny little motherboard, 2 slots for the RAM, old RAM. I think I only had 8 GB. I think it was only 4 cores. So that's kind of what I started on. I bought a case and a couple hard drives, and
Humble beginnings.
That's right.
yeah, so I started on that, and then as I got more into the community and started to install more containers, and I wasn't really able to run a VM, so that's when I decided to try and upgrade my hardware. So I invested again secondhand on eBay. It was a server grade motherboard with a server grade CPU. That gave me loads of extra slots for the RAM, and basically went to ECC RAM. So I started with, I think it was 6 core, 12 thread. So I was able to then start doing VMs, then started to go a bit crazy with VMs, started to feel the limits of that system. And so now I've just recently upgraded to a 12 core, 24 thread CPU and 64 gigabytes of RAM. And now it's just purring away. I think it's even more power efficient than it was before.
Just never enough, is it though?
Yeah.
Never
Soon I'll have to upgrade again.
I'll tell you, it's funny, like, because we go through a decent amount of hardware here at Line Tech. We try to stay relatively current on hardware, and we love to test new builds, new systems. And I remember when Threadripper first came out, and we started playing around with that. And I have a love-hate relationship with Threadripper because it's such an amazing processor. Obviously because it's got more cores than you know what to do with. But for virtualization and specifically GPU pass-through and setting up gaming VMs, it's just not. At least the first generation was really problematic, and I think the second generation was still pretty problematic. Maybe they're coming around to it now, but we've had a lot of issues with that. But we ended up shipping out our first generation version of that Threadripper system to Tom, our CEO. And the first thing he said is, "Oh my gosh, I can compile Linux kernels on this thing so freaking fast. It's scary." He was just so excited. It's like one of the few things that actually fires off every core on the system to do that kind of work. So he's something that he'd actually go walk away and get a coffee and come back and maybe it's done. Now he can't even get up from the desk before it's done. It's that quick. So it's pretty funny.
I think you find with most people, they just want a gaming setup. And there's not really any need for all those cores, but when you're doing stuff like compiling a kernel or having an insane amount of VMs, you really do actually see the benefits of all those cores.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Especially because with VMs, there's a big difference between VMs and Docker. Docker is super lightweight compared to VMs, and there's no hard commitment of resources. You can pin CPUs on Docker, and I do that so that it doesn't compete with my my VMs that are running alongside Docker, but you don't usually have to pin them from each other. It's okay if Plex shares some CPU resources with, say, another application that's running. That's not a big deal. But yeah, VMs, once you start adding a good number of different VMs, it's having a higher core count, having more memory. It's basically a requirement at that point. And I do think there are a lot of people that do gaming on Unraid. I think that has become kind of one of our real claims to fame, especially because it allows you to consolidate 2 different devices into a single device. A lot of people that are into building home servers, they also are into PC gaming, and so having two significant costing computers in your house, that's not an easy thing to justify, especially if you're married and have a kid. It's a hard sell to the wife sometimes. So being able to put it all into one box, I think, has definitely been a calling card for us.
Well, that's one of my end goals is when I'm able to get a rack server, is to set up an amazing server that's just got all the cores, an amazing GPU, loads and loads of RAM, and set something like Unraid up on it, and basically that will be my main PC, and I'll just be able to I'll just be able to have it on any screen in the house, for example, and be able to game on it, without any glitch or anything, and just have everything in one, basically.
But are you going to do that wirelessly and do casting or streaming, or are you going to go the crazy route of hardwiring HDMI and Ethernet and USB in your house?
Yeah, well, this is a dream, so I'd hardwire everything. Everything's hardwired. Everything's as fast as it can be.
I feel you on this. I want it so bad. So like, I'm going back in time now, but when we were messing around with Unraid 6 and getting things going initially and getting Docker set up, getting GPU pass-through to work on KVM correctly, I had one of these old Cooler Master towers, like really old, and it wasn't, I don't even think it was mine. I think it was actually Eric's, or maybe even Tom shipped it out to us. But it was one of the ones that had the sled. It was a tower, so it was a server case, but it was a tower, and it had those sled bays with like the purple handles that you could pull to pull the drives out of the sleds.
Yeah.
And I convinced my wife to let me put this ugly monstrosity in our family room right next to the TV and hook the graphics card on the back of it up to the TV so that I could run what was it, OpenELEC as a VM on Unraid, so that I could do and I had one of those FLIRs. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these, the IR adapter that would plug into a USB port so that you could use any IR remote to control it. Yeah. And so I set one of those up, so I had that working with the VM, and I'm like, this is so cool. And my wife's like, this is so hideous. Get it out of my living room. And that's when my dream.
You just don't understand.
You don't understand. It's so much better. And I'm like, look, no buffering, which I, by the way, get made fun of that all the time.
It's not a phase, babe. It's not a phase.
It's not a phase. Did you guys ever see the video that I put up of? So so a long time ago, I created the video for Unraid on our website. It was like a slide deck kind of video that kind of walked you through. It was like 3 minutes long. And then I did another one when we released, was it 6.1 or 6.2? And I liked doing the videos at the time because it was, it was a fun pet project or whatever, but that's just not my expertise. And so it comes off a little cheesy. I totally get it. But there's a part in that, it was part of one of those videos where I make fun of the buffering issue. And and my wife, just whenever that happens now, because we still use Netflix. We still use like traditional services to some extent because there's unique content on those platforms. So, but when we're watching and it starts buffering, she just looks at me and goes, where's Unraid? Where's Unraid? I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm never gonna live this down.
That's when you failed as a hobbyist.
Exactly. Well,
it's not as good as Netflix. It's like, I'm just a hobbyist. I'm not an international company.
This is what I want Plex to do. Okay, I maybe we can all bully Plex into adding this, because I think it's actually in Plex to do this, but it doesn't do it by default. So have you ever noticed, like, if you're watching Netflix or any decent streaming service, I think the way they work, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think the way they work is they store multiple copies of every show or movie or episode or whatever on their platform in different quality formats, so that as your bandwidth changes, it can kind of switch lanes to a lower bitrate copy of the content, right?
Yeah, and they don't transcode. They have every kind of format on storage.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah. And it has to be. There's no way they're doing real-time transcoding for as many. The cost of power is probably the cost of power for that is probably way in excess of the cost of just storing multiple copies of the content.
Exactly, right? The storage is cheaper. Plex can store 2 versions. Most people don't know that, but it can store 2 versions. But why can't it store 3 or 4?
Right. Well, not only that, it can store 2, but you have to tell it to. You have to actually go. I can't remember. I did this a while back, but you have to go in there and have it generate the second copy. But like you said, I want to go in there and I want the ability, because here's the thing, storage is getting insanely cheap, and it's becoming thicker and thicker and thicker per drive. So the days of I remember days where I used to think very critically about how I would encode video content, right?
Yeah.
What bit rate I'm going to use, how big of a file size am I going to have, and I would pick certain movies or certain shows that I cared about most. I would allow those to be at a slightly higher quality than everything else. Those days have long been gone for me, where I'm like, just give me the biggest format you got. I don't care. I got enough storage. I don't care. Just throw it all at me, and when I fill it up, I'll throw another disk in there. And I feel like that's a direct result of how cheap storage has gotten. And so I don't mind, Plex. Go ahead. Give me the capability to create my own mini Netflix in my house. I would really appreciate it because there are
agree
times.
wholeheartedly, mate.
Yeah, it would be awesome. I mean, and Plex is such a good application. I think it's probably one of the most commonly installed applications on Unraid, just
Yeah.
because of how simple it is to set up. I mean, they did for home media serving, I think, what we did for the home media server, and
Yeah.
just made everything stupid
But-
simple.
Plex is actually what got me into all this. Is when I first installed FreeNAS, it was actually because I was doing photography, and I was running out of storage on my main PC. So I decided to buy some old server hardware really cheap and basically put FreeNAS on it. And whilst I was on it, I was tinkering and I found Plex, and I was like, "Ooh, what's Plex?" And then that was kind of the start of the rabbit hole. And two and a half years later, here we are.
100%, yeah. Plex is where I started as well. That's what got me into it.
Yeah.
I think it gets a lot of people started just because, like before Plex, there was just XBMC or, what do they call it now? Kodi, so it's just that for a really long time. And that was like a media player and server kind of all in one. Although I guess it really wasn't a server, but it was just one media player. And it was cool. I mean, it did its job, but it was isolated to just you. What I think excited everybody about Plex was this idea of being able to invite other people to participate and watch your content. So now, like, I have a buddy who calls me pretty regularly for help with their Plex setup, and they have maybe 150 to almost 200 terabytes worth of storage. And this guy went nuts. He built 2 identical servers that have the exact same amount of storage just to have redundancy. Just to have redundancy for a setup. I'm like, man, and he's retired, so he doesn't have to worry about a full-time job anymore or anything like that. But I'm like, man, you're crazy. But he does it because all of his friends rely on him. They all rely on him to provide this back-end media server. And so I think that's honestly what I think a lot of people have enjoyed out of Plex is the ability to become kind of the media sommelier for their friends. Like they build this giant media collection. It's like, come on in. You can be a part of my community. You can be a part of my community now. Like I think that's where a lot of people get into it from.
It's all these other tools though as well, John, like the having the ability to request stuff,
Oh yeah.
You don't get that in a traditional service like Netflix. You don't get to request what you want, so giving that ability to your users, people love that,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then Plex has done, they've walked the tightrope better than anybody I've seen, because that is an interesting tightrope of a company to walk. Because if you listen to Keith Valerie talk about like piracy, he's like, we don't, piracy's not really a common use case on Plex, and I'm like, really? Okay, all right. Maybe you haven't met your users, but okay. But at the same time, they do a really good job of it, and the features and functionality that they have put into the product are absolutely breathtaking. Like they've really done a great job of taking what used to be a very complicated process of getting all that stuff together and making it just a lot easier to utilize. So, I think there's still frustrations. Like there's frustrations with any media server platform when it comes to, how much performance do I get out of transcoding, or how well does GPU offloading work? Like we're having problems, I believe it's with 11th generation Intel CPUs and trying to do like the GPU offload or something. Like there's problems with that right now that are specific to Plex, but there's problems with every platform. We have our fair share of bugs, so we won't talk about that right now. So hey, I want to pivot for a minute and talk something, talk a little bit more personal stuff with you guys. One of the things that I noticed between the three of you and your bios that you sent me. So Syc is into great food, Hawks is into cooking, and Duck is into sous vide cooking and barbecue. So does that mean that Hawks and Duck know how to cook the food, and Syc, you just eat it all? Is that what we're?
I'll eat it all day, brother. My wife's a chef, so I'm all about eating good food, mate. All about eating good food.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah.
She's a chef. Well, so what kind of stuff does she make for you?
Oh, well,
or does she get home at the end of the day and you're like, you get hot dog and beans. That's all you're gonna get because I'm tired of cooking.
That's exactly how it normally goes, to be honest, when you do it for a living. But no, every now and then I get spoiled. She'll make up something, like a homemade pasta or Parmigiana, anything. I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, well, we've had 2 babies now, so it's a bit harder to even find time to eat, let alone.
Yeah, congrats, by the way. Congrats on the kids.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, mate, love food.
Yeah. So Doc, you're a sous vide guy, is that right?
Yeah, there's nothing better than a sous vide steak.
I agree with you on that. I mean, well, okay. I will say, I've done sous vide, and I've done like cast iron cooking with steak. And what I'll say is that if you want guaranteed results, the sous vide, there's nothing beats the sous vide. You just drop it in there, set the temperature, and you get a huge wide berth of time to actually then go pull off the rest of the meal. You know, go sear it or whatever. But I do love cooking in cast iron, and I do feel like it's. I mean, if I want to cook real fast and just get dinner put on the table, nothing beats a cast iron pan. Like I can get that done in like 5 to 7 minutes. But yeah, I will say that like I want to start playing around with sous vide more, especially for fish. I think it would cook fish really really well, like sea bass and stuff like that. I bet it would come out amazing.
I haven't tried it enough, to be honest. I should give it a go.
I mean, it's the new hotness, man, and it's all the IT people are into sous vide because you get the mobile app and you can monitor everything. And
of course,
I mean,
you get all the stats. Everyone loves stats.
Yeah, there's a new idea for a channel.
Yeah, right. Cooking in IT.
Yeah, automating the whole process as well.
Yeah,
Coding it
exactly.
yourself.
Exactly.
Does it have Wi-Fi? Board.
Exactly. So I just bought one of those. I don't know if anybody else has one, but I just bought a meter. I don't know if you guys have seen those. The Bluetooth wireless temperature probes.
Yeah, you have to have.
Oh, I've seen
It's a
them. I've
must.
seen them all.
Yeah, I just got one the other day. I haven't tried it out yet. I'm going to be cooking some Wagyu flank steak tonight, actually, for dinner.
Oof.
And
Nice.
and yeah, it's American Wagyu, so it's not like the high priced Japanese stuff. It's I
Oh,
will say
yeah,
this much:
yeah.
if anybody out there really likes good steak, good quality steak, and you want to have a special kind of experience, go check out like Snake River Farms or D'Artagnan Beef, and go order yourself an American Wagyu flank steak. They're like $50 for the flank, so it's definitely more expensive than your average flank, but it's the marbling is so much better, and the meat is like for flank. Flank is usually a tougher piece of meat. This is like butter. It's absolutely amazing. And so I'm gonna get to try that out tonight and see how the meter works out for me. But I'm excited to play with it. I love my cooking gadgets. I can't get enough.
You'll have to send photos once you've prepared it all.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That might be
Love to see
torture,
that.
man. That might be torture for you. I got no problem sending them.
I
What are
get
you
it all
doing
the time
teasing me
from
with a
Doug.
steak, mate? It's teasing me with a steak. It's 1:20 a.m. over here.
So
It's
Yeah,
never
good
too
point.
late for steak.
I think we can get some Uber Eats. We'll figure something out.
That's right. That's right. Oh man. All right. So let's see. What else do we want to talk about today? Okay. I want to talk about some of the media setups that you guys have. I am curious. Like, so most people get into Unraid because they want to have like a home media setup. So what does the rest of your home media setups look like? Like, I want to start with Hawks because I know you wrote in your bio that you have like you build and listen to high quality hi-fi stuff. I'm just curious. Does that apply to your your movie theater setup and stuff like that? Like, do you have like a pretty illustrious setup?
So I've got a Logitech surround sound for the sound, but I've literally had those speakers for about 15 years, and they're still going strong, and it's got a big sub, so you can get the for movie experience. It's awesome. Again, I'm quite budget, so I've got a 4K TV, but it's just quite a budget one. But the main centerpiece is actually an Nvidia Shield. I've got the 2015 model, but it's just absolutely flawless, and it's one of the best devices that I've ever bought, I think. Especially for a Plex experience, you're able to just fly through the menus and everything loads instantly. There's never any buffering. You're able to direct play any media type. Yeah, I think that's the best.
So, and it has to do with the local performance of the device, right? So you're just saying it's got a better processor, better graphics, whatever, and therefore when you're interacting with it, there's no delays when loading through the menus, no delays when clicking on content.
Yeah, well, so direct playing the content is basically all the codecs that it supports. So sometimes when you get movies, whatever, there's the different formats, but with the Shield, it's just able to direct play them all. Whereas some devices, you may have the bandwidth, but actually it doesn't support that format, so it has to transcode it anyway. And then depending on your hardware, you might get buffering issues. But I'm not sure in terms of scrolling through the menu and actually loading up all the metadata of the movies and stuff. I'm not sure why it's the best, but it seems to just load it so easily. I've tried other devices and it seems to just stutter, and you scroll down and you basically just get blank squares, and then you have to wait a couple seconds for it to actually load up.
Yeah, I wonder how that compares to like my staple go-to device for the longest time for casting anything has been a Chromecast, just because they're super cheap. Like $35 and you've got yourself a stick that you can cast to. The
Yeah,
downside being,
yeah,
of course, for the longest time they had no remotes. Now they have the Chromecasts that have a little, they're really Google TVs and they have a little remote that goes with them. But the one thing that I've noticed about those Chromecasts is that their wireless performance is not as strong. Like, I don't know if they just use a crappy wireless card or what the deal is there. And then
yeah,
I've definitely noticed there's been more buffering. And I have read online before about these Nvidia Shield devices being just phenomenal as casting
yeah.
devices. And I never thought about the codex issue. I never thought that could have been it. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they actually have Chromecast Ultra built in. So there's Chromecast, but you can only actually play 1080p videos on it. You can get Chromecast Ultra, which I think is about 60, 70 pounds, which can play 4K content. But if you
Yeah.
actually get the Shield, you get the device with the remote, and you can install whatever app you want. You can control the apps, but you also get Chromecast Ultra. So if you do cast something to the device, you can actually play it in 4K, and there'll be absolutely no issues.
It's got
Wow.
like Android TV on there, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, have you done any of the game streaming stuff to the Shield?
I have, yeah.
Have you?
I've
And
done it.
does it work pretty well?
It does, yeah. Actually, I've done it from my PC. Because I'm in a rented house at the moment, I don't have anything hardwired, so my PC is wireless.
Yeah.
But even over wireless, it's still, I can still play. I can either play games on my computer or I can go downstairs and play it on the main TV with friends, and it works totally fine. And I've also actually done it from the Nvidia servers. If you've got a game that you own in Steam, you can basically play it off their servers for free.
Oh, wow.
It used to be totally free, but I think they've now changed it with a payment plan. So I think you can play it 1080p for free for a certain amount of time, or you can pay, and you can pay like 4K RTX and stuff like that. But you do notice a latency, so you're not going to be playing first person shooters. But
Yeah.
for other games, I think it's totally fine, and it's a compromise that I think some people are willing to do because hardware these days is so expensive. And you're having to upgrade every couple of years to keep up with it. Whereas with that, you pay a monthly fee, and you've always got the latest and greatest hardware.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so when you're talking about latency though, is that only with like the GeForce Go stuff where it's a remote connection? Like, what about when you're in the house? Do you still feel the latency coming from your computer to the device in the house, or is it?
I'd reckon if you're wired, you wouldn't really notice that much of a latency. I think you'd notice it again if you're a first-person shooter. Every little millisecond matters. I think you would notice that, but it's pretty much unnoticeable when you're sat in the same house as the device that you're streaming from. When you're streaming from their servers, you do notice it a bit more because you're having to go to a data center.
Yeah, and I always thought that too, because like the whole idea of doing like the gaming remotely, like that's been around for a while now. Before Nvidia, there was what was it? OnLive, I think, was a provider for a while, and then that went away. And then obviously Google's got Stadia now, and Stadia's got this weird history to it because like they went all in early on, and they were like, hey, we're not only going to do games that you're already familiar with, we're going to make games that are exclusive to Stadia that can take advantage of the horsepower of a data center and deliver graphical experiences that you could never get locally. And that excited me. And then they pulled all that stuff out. And they're like, oh, we're not doing that anymore. And so
They even gave out free devices as well. I've got one of their free
yeah.
devices that they sent out, and then obviously they've kind of pulled it now, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely have gone down this path of I think they invested in the market. They invested in the market opportunity, but I think they're struggling. I think all of these services are struggling to reach any kind of, I don't know, mass market acceptance for all of the issues you mentioned regarding latency. Like if they could ubiquitously support all games the same, I think they'd be fine. But because there are so many games out there that are what I would call Twitch games that are, require that real-time input, where real-time control is of super high importance, and that applies to shooters. That also kind of applies to racing games and a lot of sports games. It can apply to anything where there's a real-time element. It can really distract you. But when you're playing like an RPG game or even a real-time strategy game or things like that, I don't think the latency is as big of a deal. So I think that's what a lot of people are using those services for right now, is for playing games that speak well to that, or maybe even single player shooter games, maybe. But I mean that whole mouse latency thing, like the best way to describe that feeling, because there's a lot of people out there that don't know what that feels like. They've only ever played locally. the best way to describe it is if you've ever had a set of headphones on, and there's even a board game I think that does this, where you have a set of headphones on, and when you talk, it plays your voice back, but at a delay, like a 2-second delay.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to keep talking. You sound like you have a mental disorder. Like you're just like you can't get it out because you're hearing yourself, and that feeling is the exact same when you're trying to use a mouse and the mouse is just the slightest bit behind you. It just drives you nuts because by the time, like, what happens is you'll move to the left with the mouse to like aim left, and you'll overcompensate because you'll keep moving even though the mouse has already reached its destination, and then it goes a little bit past it to the left, so then you overcompensate and you start going to the right. So just it's just
it ends up an absolute mess.
yeah, it's just super frustrating. And I mean, I want that stuff to work. I really want that technology to work. I think that's really cool. And I think that it'd be super useful, like in your setup, Hawks, where you're talking about, being able to play games in the living room without having to bring your PC down there or do anything hardwired. I think that's a super convenient use case. We just have to get the wireless technology a little bit further along, Yeah.
So, I think the issue as well is mostly the ISP speed. Especially all over the UK. I think a lot of the places are still on copper wires, and the speeds are just ridiculously low. Whereas I think they're now starting to invest in faster internet for everywhere. But if everyone had gigabit internet, I don't think it would even be an issue. I think you'd hardly even notice the latency.
Oh, well, you guys are welcome to come to Australia if you want to see how behind we are on internet infrastructure here, mate.
Is it really that bad?
Well, I'll put it this way, mate. They've spent the last, I don't know how many years rolling out what they call the NBN, which is the National Broadband Network sort of thing. And it was meant to be the new latest and greatest. And yet it's still copper to the home, fiber to the node. And, I'm on coax cable here, and it's only in about 3 places in the country. And it's faster than this Australia-wide package that they've been rolling out for the past 10 years. So,
oh god,
and they just keep spending money, mate. So what do you do?
Hey, well, maybe good old Elon Musk will drop a satellite over your head and you can join Starlink.
Get gigabit from the sky.
That's right. I'm excited about that. I talked about this on another episode. My folks live in rural Indiana, and they just can't get anything. Like I think I mentioned this on the other episode, but they were actually told, they called their local ISP that sells, I think, DSL. I think that's what they had locally. And the local ISP said, "I'm sorry, we're sold out." And they're like, wait, you're sold out of internet? Like, I didn't know that was a limited quantity item. But they oversubscribed the area to the point where now they said, in order for us to sell more, we would have to upgrade our infrastructure. But the cost of upgrading our infrastructure exceeds the profit we would gain by selling and building into this market. So they have to leave it the way it is. And it's just like, that's it? That's your answer? Like, that sucks. Like, there's no good solution out of that.
I think that's that's the issue with the UK, for example, is, they are pretty much at their limit of how much internet they can provide. And if they want to provide any more, they literally have to rip it all up and just start again. And, what Elon Musk is doing is actually creating a platform where, it's going to be coverage worldwide. It doesn't matter what country you're in, you're going to get the same coverage from the satellites. And if you can get the speed down. And he, the way that it's going to work from satellite to satellite and how you'd connect from, one side of the world to the other is there'd be I think it's a radio signal up to the satellite, but then the signal from there to the other side of the world is by light. So the latency is actually going to be almost zero, which is just going to be insane. And there's absolutely no way that you'd be able to do that with cables.
Yeah, and I find it weird because, like, I see all these articles that are trying to, like, poke holes in Starlink. But then on the flip side, there's all these user reviews that are like, yeah, it does exactly what they say it does. Like, there's so many people out there that are like taking screenshots of their speed test and showing their results and showing the low latency. And I mean, it looks like it works. I'm curious how it's going to work at scale. Like if it can get oversubscribed or if those issues don't really exist in this world. Like I'm not smart enough to know that stuff. So
I think the people that are complaining are probably the divers that work underneath the sea to fix the cables between countries.
Probably. Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I've seen a couple YouTube videos. So this is like people going out and testing, but they'll literally stick it in the back of the truck. They'll get like a UPS or something that is able to power it for a while. Drive up to the top of like a mountain or something, plug in their laptop, get PFSense running, and they're literally just connecting to the internet as if they were at home at the top of a mountain.
Wow. That's funny.
You can't beat that.
No. All right, well, guys, I think this is a good time to wrap things up. We're approaching the 50-minute mark here, so I want to give our audience's ears a little bit of a break. But I thought this was great. I really liked having you guys on, and I thought this was a good discussion. We got to hear a lot about your guys' setups, how you got into Unraid, what Ibracorp's all about. But before we go, Syc, I'd love you to give a shout out to the different ways that people can find you guys. I think you have a website, you have a Discord channel, YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure. You guys can reach us on our website, Ibracorp.io. You can also reach us on Discord. You can reach us on our YouTube.com/C/Ibracorp. And then you can also read our docs on docs.ibracorp.io. All the links are on our main website, Ibracorp.io. And you can find everything there that you may or may not need.
Yep, and I'll drop links in the description for this episode as well so that you guys can find these guys. Join their community, be a part of it, give them feedback, let them know what you think of their content. Remember, these guys are doing this stuff for you, and they do it for free. So thank you guys so much for doing this morning. I really appreciate it, and we'll have to have you guys on again soon. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was, mate.
Thank you so much.
I'd love to do it again.
Thank
All right,
you very
thanks,
much.
everybody.
Cheers, guys.